I hired a young woman to clean the house while my husband and I were both out. About an hour in, my phone rang. It was her, whispering, "Ma'am, is someone else supposed to be in the attic studio?" I felt a chill. "No, why?" "There's a woman. I think she's painting." My blood ran cold. "Leave the house right now." I called 911 and raced home. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this, please give it a like, follow the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of justice from. I want to see how far my story has traveled. That day, I had woken up planning to tackle the spring cleaning myself. I wanted the whole house gleaming, especially before the summer humidity settled in. When the air gets thick, it just makes all the dust stick, you know. I had my sleeves rolled up, my cleaning caddy ready, and was standing in the living room trying to decide where to start. Just as I was about to spray the windows, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out of my apron. It was Margaret, my dearest friend from college, who I hadn't seen in ages. Her cheerful voice came through the line, telling me she was passing through our town, right here in Charleston, South Carolina, for just one afternoon, and insisted on taking me to lunch. Oh, my heart just swelled hearing her. Margaret and I, we had so many memories, all-night study sessions, dreaming about our futures. How could I possibly refuse? But I looked around at the mess, the dusting I had to do, and I hesitated. I couldn't just leave the house this way. Then I remembered Chloe, a young woman in her 20s who lived just down the street. She was a sweet, quiet girl, taking art classes at the local college and always looking for odd jobs to help pay for her supplies. I gave her a call, and she accepted right away, sounding so grateful for the work. I gave her very clear instructions. Tidy the living room, mop the kitchen, and please, be careful around the old sculptures my husband, Martin, kept in the hallway. I left her the spare key under the mat and asked her to just lock up when she was done. I drove to the little bistro, the Palmetto Leaf, where Margaret was waiting. We sat under a big, shady umbrella on the patio. She told me all about her life up in Virginia, about her grandchildren who were already starting school. I told her about Martin, about his success as a renowned painter, and about my quiet life now that I was retired. We laughed so much, remembering our silly college days. Right in the middle of a story, my phone rang again. I glanced at the screen. It was Chloe. I smiled, thinking she was probably calling to say she was all finished. But when I picked up, it wasn't her usual polite voice. Instead, I heard this short, sharp breathing, like she was trying hard not to cry. "Mrs. Eleanor," she whispered, and her voice was so shaky I could barely make it out. "Is anyone else supposed to be home?" My heart just stopped. "No," I said, trying to keep my own voice steady. "I'm at lunch. My husband is at his gallery and won't be home until this evening. What's wrong, Chloe?" There were a few seconds of just terrible, heavy silence. All I could hear was her ragged breathing. Then, her voice just cracked. "There's a woman, in the attic studio. I was dusting the stairs and I saw her. She's wearing an old-fashioned dress, all stained with paint. Her hair is all stringy. She was painting. She just looked at me." Her words hit me like a bucket of ice water. I tried to stay calm, but my hand holding the phone was shaking. My first thought was an intruder. Our house is old, nearly 80 years, but we were always so careful about locking it. How could anyone have gotten in? I apologized to Margaret, telling her it was an emergency. She looked so worried, but I just shook my head. I couldn't even explain. I said into the phone, "Chloe, get out of the house. Get out right now. Lock the door and wait on the porch. I'm coming home." I called the police while I was driving, my voice cracking with panic. I explained that there was an intruder in our house, trying to give them the details even as my mind was just spinning. I tried calling Chloe back, but it went straight to her voicemail. Every ring that went unanswered made my heart pound harder, like it was trying to beat its way out of my chest. I imagined the worst, that this person had hurt her. That day, the streets of Charleston seemed to go on forever. even though I was driving as fast as I dared. When I pulled up to the house, a police car was already parked at the curb. Chloe was sitting on the bottom step of the porch, huddled over, her face white as a sheet, her eyes wide with terror. I ran to her, wrapping my arms around her, asking, "Are you all right? Did you see them again?" Chloe just shook her head, her lips pressed so tight it was like she couldn't speak. Two officers came out of the front door, one older, with a kind, serious face, and a younger woman. They said they had checked everywhere. Every room, every closet, under the beds, even the locked attic studio. There was nobody. And there were no signs of a break-in. All the doors and windows were locked tight, not a scratch on them. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding, but this awful, uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. Chloe insisted, her voice still trembling. "I swear I saw her, Mrs. Eleanor. She didn't look right. She was like a ghost." I patted her shoulder, trying to comfort her, but a seed of doubt was planted in my mind. This house was almost 80 years old. It had been in Martin's family for generations before we moved in. The old plaster walls, the way the floors creaked, the dark corners. It always felt like it was holding secrets, but I just couldn't imagine a woman. Just then, I heard Martin's car pull up the gravel driveway. He got out, his face a mask of surprise seeing the police car and me comforting a crying Chloe. I grabbed his arm and quickly told him what had happened. I expected him to be alarmed, to be worried, to want to search the house again. But Martin? He just chuckled. A soft, dismissive little laugh. He walked over to Chloe, patted her on the back, and said in that smooth, soothing voice of his, "You must have been tired, dear," and confused the play of light with a shadow. "Our house is old. It has all sorts of drafts that play tricks on the eyes." Chloe just looked down at her hands, saying nothing. I looked at her, my heart aching. I knew she wasn't a girl to make things up. She was practical, honest. She had no reason to invent a story like that. But Martin's calm, his certainty, it started to make me doubt myself. Maybe he was right. I apologized to the officers for the trouble. I felt so embarrassed. I paid Chloe for her time, told her to go home and rest, and promised I'd call her again. 3 months later, I was officially retired. No more rushing out the door in the morning, no more long faculty meetings, no more grading papers into the night. The old house in Charleston became my entire world. But the quiet, the change of pace, it kept me up. Every night, I'd lie awake, just staring at the shadows on the ceiling, listening to the old grandfather clock ticking in the hall. It was during those long nights that I started to hear things. Strange sounds coming from the attic studio. At first, it was just little creaks, like a chair leg scraping on the floor. I told myself it was just the old house settling, or the wind pushing against the eaves. But slowly, the sounds got clearer, more specific. I heard a scraping sound, like an easel being dragged across the wooden floor. Then a soft thud, like a heavy canvas being set down. Sometimes I even thought I heard the faint clinking of glass, like someone cleaning brushes in a jar. I mentioned it to Martin one morning over breakfast. I tried to keep my voice casual, but I couldn't hide the unease. "Honey, I've been hearing noises from the studio attic again. It's not the wind. It sounds like someone's up there." Martin just sipped his coffee, not even looking up from his newspaper. He replied, sounding bored, "It's just squirrels, Eleanor. That attic is ancient. It's full of old junk. It's a paradise for them. I'll buy some traps tomorrow, put them up there, and that will be the end of it." The next day, true to his word, Martin came home with several large metal traps. He placed them right at the foot of the attic stairs, just below the old, heavy door that was always kept locked. "There," he said, wiping his hands on his pants. "Now you can sleep in peace, my love." And the strangest thing? The noises stopped, completely. No more scraping, no more thuds. I sighed with relief, telling myself Martin had been right all along. It was just squirrels, and I had been working myself up over nothing. But then, other odd things started to happen. Things I couldn't just brush off. One afternoon, I bought some very expensive linseed oil from the art supply store. It was a special blend I knew Martin hated. He always complained about the smell, said it was too old-fashioned, and stuck to his modern acrylics. I, on the other hand, loved the nutty scent. It reminded me of my own art classes in college. I stored the can on the shelf in the pantry. The next morning, I went to get some flour, and I froze. The can was open. A significant amount was missing, as if someone had poured it into a smaller jar. I asked Martin, who was sketching in the living room, "Did you use some of that new linseed oil?" He looked up, frowning, like I'd asked him if he'd started flying. I thought I'd experiment with something different," he replied, turning back to his sketchbook. "It's interesting." I just stood there, confused. Martin never used oils. He complained they took too long to dry, that the fumes gave him a headache. But I didn't want to start anything, so I just nodded and left the kitchen. A deep, cold knot of doubt began to form in my stomach. A few days later, the entire can was gone. I searched the pantry, I checked the trash, but there was no sign of it. This time, I didn't ask Martin. A few weeks after that, Martin and I drove up to Columbia for the weekend to see an exhibition. We left Friday morning and came back late Sunday night. When we walked in, the house was dark and silent. I went upstairs to the guest bathroom to wash my face and get ready for bed. But when I turned on the light, I gasped. The sink, the beautiful white porcelain sink, was stained. There was a bright cobalt blue ring around the drain, and smears of it on the faucet, as if someone had been washing paintbrushes in a hurry. My heart hammered in my chest. No one had been home for 2 days. How was this possible? I called for Martin, my voice shaking. "Come here, please. The sink, it's covered in blue paint." He walked in, glanced at it, and just shrugged. "Must have been that new pen I bought, my love. It must have leaked when I was washing my hands." I looked at the counter. There was no pen. "What pen, Martin?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. He frowned, looking annoyed. "Oh, I don't know, Eleanor. A blue one. You always worry about nothing. It's just a stain. I'll clean it tomorrow." But he never did. The next day I scrubbed the sink, and the stain was gone. I checked his pens, the pipes, everything. It wasn't ink. It was oil paint. Martin's explanations, while they sounded plausible, just didn't sit right. The noises, the missing oil, the paint-stained sink. It was all wrong. A week later, I decided to deep clean Martin's office. It was his sanctuary, a small room on the first floor, filled with art books, rolled-up canvases, and old papers. I always thought we should donate some of the books he never read to the college library. That day, I was dusting a tall metal shelving unit. It was piled high with old portfolios and boxes of supplies. As I reached for a heavy portfolio on the top shelf, my hand slipped. It tipped, and a cascade of loose papers and sketchbooks fell to the floor. The sound of them hitting the hardwood made me jump. I knelt to pick them up, and that's when I saw it. A small hidden compartment in the back of the shelf, which had been knocked open. I hesitated, then reached inside. My fingers touched a worn, leather-bound portfolio I had never seen before. It looked ancient. It didn't look like anything of Martin's. He liked modern, sleek things. This was old world. With a mix of dread and curiosity, I pulled it out. My hands were shaking. I opened the cover. Inside were dozens of charcoal sketches. The drawings were exquisite, full of life and shadow, clearly a woman's touch. I flipped through them, my breath catching in my throat. They were preliminary drawings for Martin's most famous paintings, the ones that had made him a star. The river heron, the lady in the light. They were all here, in a hand that was not his. My heart was pounding so hard I felt dizzy. It couldn't be. I knew Martin's process. He hated sketching. He always said it killed the spontaneity. He painted directly onto the canvas. Everything of his, from his compositions to his notes, he did with broad strokes of paint. I remember once asking him to sketch our garden, and he'd laughed and said, "Darling, why sketch when you can paint?" So, whose portfolio was this? A secret apprentice? An admirer's gift? I sat down hard in his desk chair, the portfolio feeling like a ton of bricks in my lap. Part of me wanted to confront him the second he walked in the door. I wanted to hear him explain this. But I hesitated. I knew him. Martin could talk his way out of anything. He'd smile that charming smile. He'd say it was an old student's work or something he'd bought for inspiration. And I, like so many times before, would nod and let the silence cover it up. But not this time. I carefully put the portfolio back in the hidden space and pushed it all the way in. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick. Around 2 a.m, I heard a faint sound from the hallway. A tiny click, then a soft creak. It was so quiet, but in the dead of night it sounded like a shout. I sat bolt upright, my heart leaping into my throat. I don't know why, but I immediately thought of the locked door to the attic studio. I slipped out of bed, careful not to turn on a light. The moonlight coming through the hallway window was just enough to see a crack of light. The attic door was open, just a tiny bit. A draft of cold, musty air was coming down, carrying the sharp scent of turpentine and old canvas. I stood frozen, my feet stuck to the floor. Fear and curiosity were warring inside me. I went back to the bedroom and gently shook my husband's shoulder. "Martin, wake up. The studio door is open." Martin groaned, half asleep, and sat up, clearly irritated. He put on his slippers and walked ahead of me down the hall. But when we got there, the door was shut. The heavy deadbolt was firmly in place, as if it hadn't been touched in months. I just stared at it, looking for any sign. A scratch. Anything. Martin turned to me, his face a mixture of pity and annoyance. "Eleanor," he said, his voice low and tired. "You've been so on edge lately. You're not sleeping. You're starting to imagine things. Please, come back to bed." He led me back. I got into bed, but I kept my eyes wide open. For the first time, I started to wonder, was I really imagining it? In the days after I found the portfolio, I tried to act normal. But that gnawing unease was eating me alive. I started watching Martin's every move, every word. He had picked up a new habit lately that just made my suspicions worse. Around 11 at night, when I was already in bed reading, he'd say he needed to organize his thoughts. "I just need to clear my head, Eleanor," he'd say, his voice soft. "This new commission is tricky. You go on to sleep." I would nod, but every time his office door clicked shut, I felt that invisible wall between us get higher. One night, I woke up feeling thirsty. The clock on the nightstand said it was almost 1:30. I reached out for Martin, but his side of the bed was empty. The sheets were cold. A jolt of panic went through me. Where was he? I put on my robe and went into the hall, thinking he'd fallen asleep in his office, which he sometimes did. I walked down the dark hallway. The moonlight cast long, spooky shadows. I pushed open his office door, but the room was empty. The computer was off, the desk chair neatly tucked in. "Martin?" I called out softly. My voice just echoed in the quiet. I went downstairs to the kitchen, thinking he'd gone for a glass of water. It was empty, too. I started to walk through the house, calling his name, my voice getting shakier. My heart was pounding, like it knew I was about to find something awful. As I passed the staircase leading to the second-floor landing, I heard it. A soft footstep, almost silent. I looked up, and I saw a silhouette slowly coming down the attic stairs. It was Martin. He was in his pajamas, walking on his tiptoes, trying not to make a sound. In his hand, he was carrying a silver tray. the one we used for guests. When he saw me standing at the bottom, his eyes went wide. A look of pure shock, almost terror, crossed his face. The tray slipped from his grip, clattered onto the wooden landing, and a small, empty porcelain bowl bounced and shattered into a dozen pieces. The sound ripped through the silence of the house. I stumbled back. I looked at the broken pieces, confused. The bowl was empty, but it looked rinsed. There were no crumbs, no residue. That just made me more confused. I looked up at Martin, my voice trembling. "What were you doing up there? I thought you were in your office." He bent down and started picking up the broken pieces, his movements slow, like he was buying time. He wouldn't look at me. He said, his voice strained, I was stuck on the composition. The gallery won't stop calling, you know. I needed a quiet space. I went up to the studio for a while. I brought a snack. I just stood there, watching him, unable to believe a word. I knelt down to help. When my hand brushed his on the floor, his skin felt cold. That hand, which I had held for 40 years, suddenly felt like a stranger's. I knew he was under pressure. The constant calls from Mr. Harrison, his agent, always made him tense. Maybe he just needed to be alone. Maybe I was the one going crazy. The next morning, the silence in the house was deafening. I woke up exhausted, my head spinning. Martin, avoiding my eyes, got up even earlier than usual. I heard him in the kitchen, but he didn't make me a cup of coffee like he always did. He locked himself in his office, and I knew not to bother him. I just stood in the hall, staring at the door. Around noon, Martin came out, dressed in his traveling coat and carrying a small suitcase. He stopped in the living room where I was pretending to read a book. "I need to get away for a few days," he said, his voice flat. "Maybe to Chicago. I need some inspiration." I looked up, shocked. Martin never took spontaneous trips. He planned everything. "Why so suddenly?" I asked, trying to sound calm. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared out the window. "It just came to me," he said. "Be safe while I'm gone." But just as he got to the front door, he turned back. He put his hands on my shoulders. His grip was tight, much tighter than usual, and it startled me. "Eleanor," he said, his voice low and serious. "While I'm gone, don't let anyone in the house. Do you understand me? Especially not from the gallery. If Mr. Harrison comes looking for me, tell him I went away and you have no idea when I'll be back." I nodded, but that cold dread was growing. It didn't sound like a request. It sounded like a threat. Martin had been gone for maybe 2 hours when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Mr. Harrison, Martin's agent, and a young assistant. They both looked angry. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. Martin's words were ringing in my ears. But I couldn't just hide. I took a deep breath and opened the door, putting on a smile. Mr. Harrison didn't wait to be invited in. He stormed right into the foyer. "Eleanor," he said, his voice sharp, "I know Martin is here. Stop covering for him. We need the new canvases. The deadline was last week." I kept my composure, repeating exactly what Martin had told me to say. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrison, but Martin left this morning. He needed to find some inspiration. I don't know when he'll return." Mr. Harrison let out a short, bitter laugh. He pointed across the street, toward our neighbor Mr. Peterson's house. "Don't lie to me," he said. "Mr. Peterson told me he sees the light on in that attic studio almost every single night. If Martin is working that hard, he should have the paintings finished, not be hiding from me." The young assistant, a girl with kind eyes, added, "Ma'am, we just want to help. If Mr. Martin is having an artist's block, he just needs to tell us." Her voice was kind, but I wasn't listening. Mr. Harrison's words had hit me like a physical blow. The attic light. I had never seen it. We never went up there. Why would the light be on? And why would our neighbor see it every night? My heart just stopped. I somehow managed to walk them to the door, promising I'd have Martin call. But as soon as I closed it, I leaned against it, shaking. My mind was racing. All the pieces. They were fitting together. The noises, the missing linseed oil, the paint in the sink, the mysterious sketches, the empty bowl. And now, the light. It all pointed to one place. The attic studio. That locked room I hadn't been inside in over 20 years. I didn't feel afraid anymore. I just felt cold. A cold, hard determination to know the truth. I went to Martin's office, to the hook where he kept all his keys. I looked for the old iron key to the attic. It wasn't there. He had always said he'd lost it years ago, but I knew where he kept a spare for everything. I went to his desk, opened the bottom drawer, and felt underneath. Taped to the bottom was a small, cold iron key. I grabbed the heavy flashlight from the kitchen. I dragged the little step stool from the pantry and set it at the top of the stairs, right under the heavy door. My heart was hammering, but it wasn't from fear. It was from certainty. The old-fashioned key was stiff in the lock. I had to use both hands, gritting my teeth, and turned it hard until I heard a loud, grinding click. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent house. I pushed the door open. A wave of suffocating, stale air hit me, filled with the smell of turpentine and dust. It made my stomach turn, but I didn't stop. I turned on the flashlight. The bright beam cut through the darkness. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The studio was huge, much bigger than I remembered. It was filled with old furniture covered in white sheets, looking like a family of ghosts. Cobwebs hung from the rafters. The only light came from one tiny, filthy circular window at the far end. I swept the flashlight beam across the room. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would break. And then, in the farthest corner, I saw it. A small, clear space. An old wooden easel, a small table covered in jars and tubes of paint, and a single bare bulb hanging from a cord, casting a weak yellow glow. And then I saw her. A woman, sitting on a small stool, her back to me. She was so thin. Her long, graying hair was matted and tangled, falling down her back. She was wearing what looked like an old, tattered nightgown, stained with all colors of paint. She was dabbing at a canvas, and the sound of the brush was the only thing I heard. I was paralyzed. I couldn't breathe. I stammered, Who are you?" My voice sounded tiny. The brushing stopped. The woman slowly, so slowly, turned her head. Under the dim light, I saw her face, gaunt, pale, and sick. Her eyes were sunken, but they were eyes I knew. My world just fell apart. My knees buckled, and I had to grab an old chair to keep from collapsing. It was Clara, my cousin. The cousin I hadn't seen in 25 years. Clara, who my whole family believed had run off to Europe, who we thought was lost forever, was here, in my attic. Around her was a small, terrible world. Stacks and stacks of brilliant, finished canvases. Dozens of empty cans of soup. A cot with a dirty, thin blanket. And an old bucket in the corner. It was the proof of a life, in captivity. Clara looked at me, her dry lips trembling. She tried to speak, but her voice was just a raw croak, like she hadn't used it in years. "Eleanor?" She couldn't say anything else. She just looked at me, her eyes filling with tears, as if she was begging my forgiveness. I couldn't hear. Hot, stinging tears blinded me. I walked toward her, my legs shaking. Clara, my cousin, who I had cried over for years, thinking I'd lost her. Now, she was here, like a ghost, in my own home. I took her arm. It was as thin as a bird's leg. I could feel every bone. "We're going downstairs," I said, my voice choked with sobs. Come downstairs right now, Clara. I helped her stand. A hurricane of emotion was ripping me apart. Joy at finding her, horror at what she had become, and a terrible growing fear. Why? Who did this? And Martin? What did Martin have to do with this? I helped her down the stairs. Her every step was weak and shuffling, like her legs had forgotten how to walk. The light from the hallway made her flinch, her eyes squeezing shut. She looked like a creature of the dark, and it broke my heart in two. Clara, who had been so vibrant, so full of life, was now just a fragile shadow. I led her to the living room, to the most comfortable armchair. I ran to the kitchen, my hands shaking so hard I could barely fill a glass of water. I brought it to her. She tried to take it, but she was trembling too much. I knelt in front of her, held the glass to her lips, and helped her drink. I was trying so hard not to cry. She needed me to be strong. After a few sips, Clara just broke. It wasn't loud. It was a silent, agonizing sob that shook her whole body. She leaned forward and just collapsed against my shoulder. I held her tight, feeling her bones, just letting her cry out all the years of pain. When she finally grew quiet, she started to talk, her voice a reedy whisper. "Eleanor," she murmured, staring at the floor. I never thought I'd see you again." I took her hand. It was ice cold. "Tell me, Clara," I said. "Tell me what happened. Why are you here?" And she told me. Every word was like a knife in my heart. She told me about that night 25 years ago. A gallery owner, a Mr. Vance, had invited her to his studio to discuss her portfolio. Clara, so young and trusting, went alone. But when she got there, he was drunk. He tried to force himself on her. Clara fought back. She pushed him, screamed, but he wouldn't stop. In her panic, she grabbed a heavy marble paperweight from his desk and hit him. "I just wanted him to stop, Eleanor," she cried, her voice cracking. I didn't mean to." The blow was too hard. He fell, hit his head on the corner of the desk, and he was gone. Clara said she just stood there, paralyzed with fear. And that's when Martin showed up. He said he was just stopping by to see if she wanted to come to our house for dinner, but he walked in and saw everything. "I wanted to call the police, Eleanor," Clara whispered, her eyes red. "I wanted to turn myself in, but Martin wouldn't let me." He stood there looking at the scene with a chilling calm. "You'll go to prison, Clara," he told her. "You'll lose your whole life. Let me handle this. For Eleanor. I'll protect you." I was listening, my whole body numb. Martin. My Martin. He had used my love for her, and her love for me. He convinced Clara that hiding it was the only way. That night, he drove Mr. Vance's body out to the marshes. He buried him where no one would ever look. Then he brought Clara back to our house while I was asleep, and he locked her in the attic studio. "It's just for a little while," he told her. "Just until this blows over." But a little while turned into 25 years. Martin turned my cousin into a ghost in her own family's home. When the police investigated, they found that Mr. Vance had been in financial trouble. Martin, he skillfully planted the rumor that Clara and Vance were having an affair and had run away together with his money. The story stuck, and Clara became, in the eyes of the world, a disgrace who had abandoned her family. I was sobbing now, but not from sadness. It was rage, pure, hot rage. I remembered the weeks after she disappeared, how I cried myself sick, how her mother, my aunt, aged 10 years in a month. And I remembered Martin's sudden change in career, his first masterpiece that shocked the art world. It was all built on my cousin's suffering. "The first few years, they were horrible," Clara continued, her voice hollow. "I thought I was going to go insane. The guilt, the loneliness. I dreamed every night that they were coming for me. She took a shaky breath. To keep my mind busy, I started to paint. I painted all the things I couldn't see. The sun, the river, anything but those four walls. I imagined her, hunched over in that cold, dark room, her art the only thing keeping her alive. And then one day, she said, Martin found my paintings. I thought he'd be proud. But his eyes, Eleanor, they lit up. He said, Clara, this is genius. Paint. Paint for me. I will be your hands in the world. I felt sick. I remembered when Martin suddenly announced he was quitting his teaching job to paint full-time. We were all so surprised. He'd never shown that level of talent before. I was so proud. And now? The truth was so ugly. Martin wasn't a genius. He was a monster. A thief who had stolen Clara's talent, her life, and locked her away. I tried to stop, she whispered. So many times. I told him I couldn't live like that I had to confess. But every time, he threatened me. He said if I told, you would be the one who suffered. He said you couldn't stand the scandal, that your husband was an accomplice to covering up a murder. He said you would lose everything. Your home, your reputation. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. He had used me. He had used our love as the bars of her prison. I'm so sorry, Clara, I choked out. I didn't know. I never knew. But she shook her head, her thin fingers grabbing my hand. Don't you be sorry, Eleanor. I was weak. I was afraid. I let him. She said it got so much harder when I retired and was home all the time. Before, she could sneak down at night when I was asleep. That's why I had to use the guest bathroom, she said, looking ashamed. To clean my brushes. That's why I took the linseed oil. I'm sorry about the sink. I remembered all those little things. The noises, the supplies, the paint. It all made a terrible, painful sense. I thought about Martin's paintings, the ones I had loved. Critics always marveled at his ethereal, haunted style, how the light always seemed to be coming from a place of deep longing. Now I knew why. It wasn't a style. It was because Clara's entire world was a small, dark room, and she was painting the freedom she longed for. Clara gripped my hands, her eyes suddenly fierce. Eleanor, she said, her voice shaking but firm. I can't live like this one more day. I have served my time for 25 years in that room. Now, I want to face real justice. I want to turn myself in. Her words were the final blow. I had just found her, and now I was going to lose her again. But looking at her, at the desperate hope in her eyes, I knew she had to. It was the only way she could ever be free. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. Okay, Clara, I said. We'll go together. The next morning, I dressed Clara in my own clothes. They hung off her tiny frame. We hadn't slept. I just sat with her, telling her about the world, about cell phones and the internet, and all the people we had lost. She just listened, her eyes wide, like a child. I drove her to the police station. She sat in the passenger seat, hunched over, staring out the window at the cars and the people. It's all so loud, she whispered. I took her hand. I'm right here, Clara. We'll do this together. At the station, I asked to speak to the head detective. When I said the name Clara Jennings and the 1999 disappearance of Mr. Vance, the entire mood changed. They put us in a quiet room. And Clara, with me holding her hand, told her story. Her voice was steady. She told them everything. The attack, the accident, and the 25 years Martin had kept her hidden, stealing her work. The police were stunned. The case was immediately reopened. A team was sent to my house, to that horrible attic studio. They collected the canvases, the empty cans, the lock. Another team, following Clara's 25-year-old memory, went to the marshes. After hours of digging, They found human remains. They were identified as Mr. Vance. The arrest warrant for Martin was issued immediately. The police waited for him at the airport when his flight from Chicago landed. I wasn't there, but Mr. Peterson, our neighbor, told me. He said Martin didn't even look surprised. When they put the handcuffs on him, he just lowered his head, as if he'd been waiting for this day his whole life. I felt nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness. The man I had loved for 40 years was a stranger. I hired the best lawyer in the state for Clara. Someone who understood. He argued self-defense, and argued that the 25 years she'd spent in that attic was a sentence far crueler than any prison. He was confident the judge would show mercy. I spent my days getting things ready for her, for when she got out. I bought her new clothes, paints, and canvases. But a few days later, while I was at the hospital where she was being treated for severe malnutrition, the phone rang. It was the hospital. A cold, formal voice. "Ms. Eleanor, we're so sorry. Clara, she developed an infection. Her system was just too weak." The phone slipped from my hand. My world just ended. Again. Clara, my cousin. The one I had just gotten back. She was gone. She had told the truth. She had faced her past. But her body just couldn't handle the freedom. The doctor said she'd left a note for me. I held it, my hands shaking. Her handwriting was so weak. "Dear Eleanor," it said, "when you read this, I'll be free. For 25 years, I painted to stay alive. But I could never sign my own name. I lived as a ghost. And now it's time for the ghost to rest. Don't be sad. Think of it as I've finally finished my last painting. It's still in the attic under the cot. It's the only one I ever did of myself. If you can, please let it have my name, Clara Jennings." I folded the letter, holding it to my chest. I knew what I had to do. The trial against Martin was a sensation. The press called it the Phantom of the Studio. He was faced with the evidence, with Clara's testimony, with the paintings. He confessed to everything. He was charged with kidnapping, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and massive fraud. The sentence was life. But I didn't go. I couldn't look at him. Instead, I went back to the house, back to the attic. I found the painting under the cot. It was a self-portrait. But it wasn't the gaunt, sick woman I had found. It was Clara as she was, young, vibrant, and full of fire. It was beautiful. I spent the next year working with the galleries. The art world was in an uproar. I made them reattribute every single one of Martin's famous works. The book, The Art of Martin Farrow, was pulled from the shelves. A new one was printed, The Art of Clara Jennings. Her self-portrait hung on the very first page. The exhibition of her real work traveled the world. She was finally recognized. Sometimes I still go up to the attic. It's not a prison anymore. I had a huge skylight put in. It's my own little studio now. I've started painting again. I open the window and the sunlight streams in, and I can almost smell the linseed oil. Clara's voice was recovered, and justice, in its own way, was served. And when it was all over, I understood something. There is no lock strong enough to keep the truth hidden forever. A lie, no matter how beautiful you paint it, will always crack and peel with time. Clara's life proves that silence can be a prison, and that fear can turn us into ghosts in our own lives. If there's one lesson I want to leave you with, it is this. Dare to face the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Speak up, even if your voice is trembling. Because only when we step out of the dark are we truly free. And only when the truth is told can the souls who were trapped finally find peace. The story you just heard had its names and locations changed to protect everyone involved. We're not telling it to judge, but with the hope that someone out there will listen and think. How many people are suffering in silence, right in their own homes? I truly wonder. If you were in my shoes, What would you have done? Would you have chosen to stay quiet, just to keep the peace? Or would you have faced it all, to get your voice back? I want to know what you think, because every story can be a light for someone else. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us all to better days. For now, on the final screen, I'm leaving 2 of our channel's most surprising stories. I am sure you will love them. Thank you for staying with me. Did you like this story? And what city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked this story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories just like this one. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm really looking forward to reading your comments. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more to see on my channel. Please don't forget to follow and click that little bell so you don't miss tomorrow's story. I tell a new one every single day. See you in the next story. With all my love and respect.